Hi everybody, I'm Melissa. I'm holding the camera here and I'm with Jarrod and Oscar. We're here at New Mexico Wildlife Center and we are going to be broadcasting live while Jarrod tells you a little bit about owls and Oscar the great horned owl. Before we get started, I should mention New Mexico Wildlife Center is located just north of Santa Fe, and while we're closed right now due to the coronavirus pandemic, we are usually open to the public Monday through Saturday 9 to 4, and we hope to be open again soon. We are a nonprofit organization supported almost entirely by donations and grants, so we appreciate all of our supporters and followers out there. And Jarrod, tell us a little bit about great horned owls.
Yeah, so like Melissa said, everyone, this is a great horned owl. You can tell how they got their name by those clumps of feathers on top of their head there. They aren't horns like we think of horns with other animals. They're just groups of feathers that help them camouflage when they're standing up in trees. They aren't their ears either. All they are just those clumps of feathers to help them camouflage. Their ears are actually just small holes on the side of their head. If you take a look at Oscar's face right here, you can see she's got a line of feathers around her eyes, and that is what we call a facial disc. Now that facial disc kind of acts like the cartilage around our ears to help bring in sound waves into our ears so we can hear. Same thing with their facial disc, except if you want to try it at home and you can hear me maybe a little bit louder if you cup your hands around your ears. This is what the facial disc is doing. It's catching sound waves from their environment and directing them into their ears. Now their ears are a little bit different than ours in a pretty cool way. If you look at my head, my ears are directly across on each side of my body, or each side of my head. Hers, Oscar's ears, are a little bit asymmetrical. They're offset. They're not quite symmetrical on each side of her head. One might be a little bit higher than the other. One might be a little bit lower, a little more forward, and a little more backward. And the reason for that is because they use their hearing as their primary sense to find their food. And so their hearing has to be super, super good in order to hear a mouse's heartbeat or rustling in the leaves as they're hunting around. Now, those ears are super, super important for tracking their prey. And Oscar here we can't see them because they're underneath that facial disc, but just behind that facial disc are her ears. I could probably stick, there's a nice little yawn. Her eyes, as her next sense, her eyes are large, very, very, very large. So large, in fact, that she doesn't have any muscles behind her eyes. So if you look at her closely, she will never move her eyes around in her head. Unlike me, who I can look over at Oscar without moving my head, I can look at Melissa, I can look up at the sky, even roll my eyes a little bit, all because I have muscles behind my eyes. But Oscar's eyes are so large, they take up so much of her skull cavity, that there's just not enough room for those muscles behind her eyes.
And her eyes sure are striking, aren't they?
Those large forward-facing eyes tell everything else out in nature that she is a predator and she could eat you. So,
tell us a little bit about Oscar, Jarrod, in particular.
Yeah, Oscar here is actually our oldest resident at the New Mexico Wildlife Center. She turned 36 years old this year. We don't know exactly when she was born, so at the turn of the year, January 1st, she gains a new year of age. So 36 years. She was found in 1984, and she was found just south of the center here in a village called Tasuke. A gentleman was watching the nest, and he noticed that the adults weren't coming back. So he went up in the ladder and discovered Oscar in the nest, and she was the only one in the nest, and she had shotgun pellets in her right wing and her left eye and across her body too. So then she was brought into the New Mexico Wildlife Center, and she was able to have that shrapnel removed from her wing and her left eye, but she is blind in that left eye, and she doesn't have full she doesn't have full function of that right wing, which is why she is a permanent resident here at the New Mexico Wildlife Center and will not be released back out into the wild. But Oscar has done a huge part as an animal ambassador here at the New Mexico Wildlife Center, helping with conservation efforts and helping me in my job as the education coordinator do wildlife programs and teach New Mexico residents about great horned owls and how special they are and how important they are for their environment. So she has done 36 years of programming to help hopefully protect other great horned owls from injuries, from poaching, from hunting and shooting. And
as I recall, she was also a foster mom to a lot of chicks. Is that right?
Yeah, she was a foster mom. She actually took care of a few fledgling great horned owls that came into rehab who didn't really have any injuries, but needed that adult in their life for socialization during that critical part of their rearing. And then those owlets, those fledglings, were able to be released back out into the environment. And so she has helped in that way too, which is such an amazing project for her to undertake. And she's done a fantastic job.
She has. She's one of my favorites here. Jarrod, let me just interrupt for a moment and welcome everybody who's joined us here on Facebook Live. We appreciate you coming and checking in with us. This is our first attempt at a Facebook Live video, so we thought we would introduce Jarrod and Oscar the Great Horned Owl. So if you have any questions, go ahead and post them here. We are going to be on for another couple of minutes. We get a lot of questions here, Jarrod. Kids want to know what owls eat, and then they often ask about owl pellets. Can you talk about either of those things for us?
Yeah, so the great horned owl specifically has such a large range of diet. They'll eat almost anything. A lot of it is mammals and other birds too. So mammals being like mice, rats, rabbits, squirrels, anything they can get their talons on, really. And actually, they have been known to even raid other nests of ravens and crows, even maybe some fledgling great horned owls. They're not really picky about what they're eating. Owl pellets are pretty cool because after she eats a meal, her digestive system doesn't quite work the same way as ours do. And so she'll cough up a pellet probably in about 16 hours after a meal or so. And inside that pellet are things she couldn't digest, like bones, nails from like a rat.
Like toenails, you mean?
Toenails, yeah, fingernails. Mm-hmm. Also teeth, she can't digest teeth, and hair. And her system is so cool that it packs all the bones, the nails, the teeth inside the pellet and wraps it in the fur. So when she coughs it up, that pellet doesn't scratch her throat on the way out, which is really, really interesting that her system has been able to evolve and adapt to be able to do that.
Now I've heard that great horned owls actually have an even more varied diet than that. You know what I'm talking about? What one of their favorite foods is that most other animals don't eat?
Yeah, so they're so specialized in that they are one of the few animals, skunks. They, based on that, since they're eating skunks, we can kind of assume that they don't have a great sense of smell. They do have a nose. It's kind of covered up by those specialized crine feathers that kind of act like whiskers. But that's kind of our assumption. They're one of the few predators of skunks, which is super important for our ecosystem to help regulate that population and control that population. So I don't know about you all, but I don't think I'd be going after a skunk to try and eat it in the event that I get sprayed. We've actually had a few great horned owl residents come into our rehab hospital in the past that have been very, very stinky and most likely recently had gotten a skunk.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like we're having a little bit of technical difficulties here getting it on. Oops, there we go. There, all right. No problem. That was me there just for a second. Let's see. While I'm working on that, Jarrod, what else can you tell us about their coloration? I think that's one of the most fascinating things about great horned owls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, their coloration is very specific to their environment. You know, it helps them camouflage. They've got a lot of different specialized feathers that help them camouflage. Even those great horns, so those tufts of feathers on their head, like I mentioned earlier, do help them camouflage. But their coloration, if I was to stand next to a cottonwood tree, a juniper tree, she would blend in tremendously well. And just with the pattern and everything, it looks like tree bark. And sometimes what ends up happening is that, especially coming up in the baby season here soon, we get fledgling great horned owls that come into us. And what usually happens is that people find them down on the ground underneath the tree. And that's because that's where they can see them and they look vulnerable. Yawn. But what they don't notice is the adult great horned owl up in the tree watching and taking care of them. And the reason they don't see them is because of this coloration on their body, and they just blend in so tremendously well. So if you do see a fledgling great horned owl on the ground, take a look up in the tree. Make sure that, you know, the mom is taking care of it, that someone is around watching it. The mother great horned owl does a lot better job taking care of her fledgling than even we can in our rehab hospital. So take a look at that before you bring in a possible orphaned great horned owl.
That's good advice, Jarrod. It's about that time of year when baby great horns are going to be seen around. I see that Amanda has said hello. So there's our friend Amanda. Hi there. Jarrod, do you have anything else you'd like to add about Oscar? This is Oscar and Jarrod, by the way, at New Mexico Wildlife Center. We are talking about Oscar and great horned owls in general. Jarrod, maybe you could mention, before we sign off here, a little bit about what I see her doing there with her gular fluttering.
Ooh, her gular fluttering. Yeah, so with that, unlike mammals, raptors and other birds, they don't have sweat glands. So it's similar to maybe like a dog panting. We are inside right now, so we're not battling the wind while I'm talking. But part of that could be because she is a little warm. And so as we move back outside, we'll bring her back out into her mew, and that'll probably slow down. And she'll open up her feathers to let some air flow through there, and that'll help cool her down as well too. And maybe a little yawn too.
Big yawn.
Yeah.
All right, terrific. Well, Jarrod, I think that about wraps it up. You've done a great job telling us about Oscar. Again, we are from New Mexico Wildlife Center. We're supported by grants and donations and would love to hear from you. If you have ideas for future Facebook Live videos, we'd love to hear about it. Next week, we're intending to do a Facebook Live tour of the center, so we hope you'll join us for that. Thanks very much, Jarrod, and thank you, Oscar. Bye-bye.